All right, guys, welcome to Pochettino's USMNT November roster, our second to last camp before the World Cup next summer. It's an important camp. We won't have another camp for another 5 months. Yeah, in March will be the next one. Um, and it's an interesting roster because we are still plagued by injuries, and we'll talk about that. There are some faces that we didn't expect to be there that are there. For example, Joe Scally and Giovanni Reyna. Um, and then there are some guys that are surprisingly left off for unusual reasons, and we'll talk about those too. It's not a terrible roster considering I mean, considering the injuries, it's not a terrible roster. It is still a Pochettino roster, so there's still a few guys there that you're like, why are they still here? But we'll talk about that. How are you guys doing? How's your Wednesday hump day going? Dusty Westy says, keep Scally away from the golf carts this camp. Yeah, hopefully Scally, whatever he did, the rumors are golf cart. Um, hopefully he, really shows out in this camp because having Scally there, playing well, being an option, both at fullback and at center back, and we'll talk about that, would be huge for this team going into next summer compared to some of the options. He's not a starter, right? Probably should never be a starter. But if we start going down that depth chart, that's where Scally starts to matter, right? Zawadzki making roster needs to be studied. Yeah, he's been trying to um, he's been trying to call in Zawadzki many times, and Zawadzki keeps getting injured right before camp. Um, oh, it's Thursday. What am I saying? Yeah, it's not Wednesday. Sorry, my week is messed up. Sorry about the late stream, by the way. I couldn't do it this morning because I was on set. I too must work like all of you. Julian Vivas, hello, Pete. I don't like the roster. No matter what happens in the World Cup, I don't want Poch to continue. Why isn't McKennie there or Banks? Yeah, we'll talk about both McKennie and Banks and why they are not there. Johnny's another one that's a little bit surprising that he's not there. And really, when you get to this stage of preparations for a World Cup, it's all about maximizing cohesion and chemistry between your players, the best players, the ones that are actually going to play at a World Cup, the guys that can actually be contributors at a World Cup level. That does not, however, seem to be Pochettino's priority. He seems very much to still be experimenting and bringing guys in who shouldn't be there. Now, that's not to say all of these guys. There are a few who shouldn't be here, and it's not many, to be honest, and we'll talk about it. But yeah, there are definitely some misses from this roster, and then a lot of the misses are also guys that are just injured. So that's unfortunate, and we really can't blame Pochettino for that. But we will talk about some of the other things, and also talk about what he did right with this roster, because there were some good things as well. All right. So let's basically just dive in. So 4 goalkeepers: Patrick Schulte, Matt Fries, Jonathan Klinsmann, and Roman Celentano. Sorry, that name was not changed on the template. That is Roman Celentano. There's not 2 Jonathan Klinsmans. Now, the big miss, obviously, from here is Matt Turner. Matt Turner has not played for Pochettino since the pre-Gold Cup game against Switzerland when he was terrible. And we all kind of assumed that Turner was a lock for the roster regardless, even if Fries was the starter. But not only did Turner not play in September, and he didn't play in October, but he's not even in this roster. So questions have to be asked. Does Pochettino not see Turner as a lock for the World Cup? Now, Tony's saying here, Matt is in England. Yeah, he's training with Crystal Palace in an attempt to stay fit. That should not prevent him from being called up. They don't need him to play. He's just training with their roster. If anything, this would be a chance to bring him in, maybe give him a game. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying if you wanted to, him training with Crystal Palace is not an obstacle to calling him up by any way, by any means. So it's not about that. It is about, it now begs the question, is there really only one goalkeeper who is a roster lock, who is our starter, Matt Fries? And are Jonathan Klinsmann, Patrick Schulte, Roman Celentano, and Matt Turner all fighting for the other 2 spots? Chris Brady is absent. He's injured, right? He wasn't able to play in that last game, where the Chicago Fire lost 3-0 to Philly in the playoffs. The Fire are knocked out. That's a separate story, but Brady is injured. So the big talking point is no Matt Turner. And I don't know if Pochettino's sending him a message here. To be honest, does it matter that much? No, just because I don't think there is a huge gap with a ton of these guys. Matt Freese is our starter. He should start both of these games. And everybody else is fighting to be number 2 and number 3. That's the honest truth. So those are the goalkeepers. Freese should start both of these games. I really don't. Some people are saying in the chat, should Ethan Horvath be there? No. I mean, is he better or worse than any of these guys? I don't know. Maybe he honestly hasn't been that good in the championship. I just with goalkeepers outside of even with Matt Freese, the gap is not huge. So it's hard to get too worked up about anyone because we really don't have high quality goalkeepers. We have our best option right now is Matt Freese, and it's not a great option. It's not a terrible option. I think we should give him as much, international experience as we can possibly get him because he also plays in MLS, right? He's not facing good competition on a week in, week out basis. Musa, Banks, Maloney are better than the MLS players. Yeah, we'll address each of these players, Rocco, as we get to their position. Okay. So that's goalkeepers. Let's move on to fullbacks. Serginho Dest, Alex Freeman, John Tolkien, Max Arfson, and Joe Scally. Now, obviously, Anthony Jedi Robinson is still injured, and that's worrying. Even, Poch said they're worried about it. They're in touch with Fulham's medical staff, and it will continue to be a problem. Let's hope and pray and whatever. Send good vibes to A-Rob because we absolutely need him for that left wing back role. And so instead, but the big news is Joe Scally finally gets a recall. Joe Scally has not been called up by Poch since March, since the Nations League. Rumors of a golf cart incident where he did a donut on a golf cart. We don't know if that's true or if it's just a report, but he finally gets his chance now. And hopefully he's here to work hard and to perform. I had to respond to somebody on Twitter today who was saying Scally has demonstrably shown over many times that he is not national team quality. This is absolute nonsense. He's one of the few right backs who, showed in the Copa America that he can play against good level opposition. He also went to the World Cup, didn't play for Greg Berhalter because we had to give Shaquille more minutes. But the point is he's back. And not only can he play as a fullback, but in a back three, he can play that right center back role, which is another very important aspect of Joe Scally's game. And that versatility alone, he can also play left back. So this is a guy who is 22 years old. He has Copa America experience. He did go to a World Cup. He's been a starter in the Bundesliga for 4.5 years, and he's positionally flexible. Absolutely should be here. Let's hope he gives him some minutes. No Tim Weah. So, probably he's going to start Max Arfson and Serginho Dest at wingback. John Tolkien, look, is he better than Max Arfson? Maybe, maybe not. He's playing in the 2 Bundesliga. He's playing reasonably well. I just don't think there's a big gap right now. And I don't think either of these guys are the answer to, A-Rob. Reality is, if A-Rob's injured, it should be Dest and Weah with Scally as the first sub. But we'll see what Pochettino does in this camp. There might be a chance, and we'll talk about this a little bit with the center backs, that Pochettino only goes back to a 4-2-3-1 in this camp just because of some of the personnel that is available or isn't available. So I'm curious to see how this actually looks. Bello is nowhere near national team quality for Maramota. Not even close. Judgmental Deity says, saw the roster late and my jaw dropped in horror. LOL. So I would like to see Joe Scally play at least one of these games at center back, especially because Chris Richards is not here. Now let's talk about the center backs. He only brought 4 center backs, which if you were going to play a back 3 is very, very unusual. You have Austin Trusty, Mark McKenzie, Tim Ream, and Miles Robinson. Now, Chris Richards is not here because he has been dealing with a niggling calf issue for Crystal Palace, and Crystal Palace strategically complained midweek about him playing every minute for the U.S. men's national team because he's supposedly injured, and yet he plays every minute for Crystal Palace twice a week. In fact, he just started today against Midtjylland. Now, Chris Richards is our best defender, and he has been playing a lot of minutes, including in the Gold Cup. I don't necessarily hate leaving him at home if indeed he is dealing with a calf issue, because he is our hope at center back at the World Cup, and we cannot risk him getting more injured. So if he gets 2 weeks off, fine, I can live with that. Okay. What's interesting is with a back three, you usually bring at least 5 center backs. So either one of two things is happening here. Either Joe Scally is going to be sort of offer cover at that fifth center back, or we're going to go back to a 4-2-3-1. I'm curious to see what Poch is going to do. Now, Chris Richards is not here. Austin Trusty gets his first call up in a long, long time. What do you think? If we play a back three, what do you think the starting lineup is going to look like? Miles Robinson, Mark McKenzie, and Tim Ream. Does Austin Trusty get a look? Does Joe Scally get a look? This is kind of interesting to see. Like, what are we going to look like against teams like Paraguay and Uruguay without Chris Richards? Right? Brian says, yeah, he played 90 today, Pete. No, I know he did. I'm not saying that you couldn't call him up. You could. He is playing every minute for Palace, so it is kind of BS if you ask me. But I have less issues with that because he is playing so many minutes for the US, in the Gold Cup and then 90 minutes in both of these camps that we had in September and October. And if there is some kind, there's different kinds of injury, right? A niggling injury for Chris Richards might mean he can play on it, but he would benefit from some rest, right? It's like niggling injuries, if you overdo them, they can be a problem. So as much as I would like to have him here, I kind of understand the logic of leaving him at home, even if there is a minor injury, because the last thing we can do, or afford to do rather, is have Chris Richards be injured for the World Cup. Now, the other big miss from here, obviously, is Noah Kai Banks. Noah Kai Banks should be here, especially with Chris Richards not being here. Now, some people are going to say, Tony, this is a really great point, and I'll address this in just a second. Some of you are going to say, well, Noah Kai Banks didn't look good against RB Leipzig. And so you shouldn't call him up. He's not ready to play in a World Cup. Now, it's true. He didn't play well against RB Leipzig. But let me ask you this. Which one of these 4 center backs do we think would play well against RB Leipzig? Tell me in the chat. Would any of these 4 play well against RB Leipzig? The answer is no. So essentially, you're holding Noah Kai Banks to a standard that you're not holding the other center backs to, right? Let's not forget, he played well against Dortmund. He played well against Mainz. He played well against Wolfsburg. So yeah, you're a young center back. You're going to have a bad game against a very good team. Does that mean that you shouldn't be called up when Miles Robinson can't play outside MLS and generally looks quite poor, including against Mexico? Like, none of these guys would look good against RB Leipzig. And on top of it, the chances are, if Noah Kai Banks continues to be a starter for the next 8 months, he's going to get a lot of experience in the Bundesliga, and he might be ready come March, or he might be ready come the World Cup. Maybe not as a starter, but maybe as the first guy off the bench, right? So now, what are we saying? We're saying we're not going to bring Noah Kai Banks because he didn't play well against a very, very, very good team, even though he played well against Dortmund. Does that change it now? He played well against Dortmund. You want him to build chemistry with this team because the odds are very high that he is going to be ready come next summer. Maybe not ready to start, right? But maybe ready to be the first defender off the bench. God forbid something happens to Chris Richards. We really want to go to a World Cup with Miles Robinson, Tim Ream, and Mark McKenzie starting? Because every single one of them has weaknesses. Whereas Noah Kai Banks, his only real weakness, inexperience. How about we get him some experience, right? How about we get him some experience? And by the way, Austin Trusty today, and don't get me wrong, I think it's fine for Austin Trusty to get a chance in this camp, and I'm actually happy he's here. But let's be clear, Mark McKenzie today against FC Midtjylland did not play well for Celtic. But I don't see anybody going, he didn't play well against Midtjylland, so he's not ready to play in a World Cup. Midtjylland is a lot worse than RB Leipzig. So how is that not being taken into account? Tim Ream did not play well in the playoffs, right? He really didn't. So what are we saying? Tim Ream for Charlotte in MLS, right, concedes a very poor goal, and that's okay. But if Noah Kai Banks does it against RB Leipzig, that should preclude him from being on the roster. Like, it doesn't make any sense, right? So, and Miles Robinson has consistently played poorly for the national team. but yet he consistently gets called up. Mark McKenzie has generally played well for Toulouse, but even with the national team, he has his goof ups too. Why are we then holding an 18-year-old center back who has the potential to not only be ready during the World Cup, but also the potential to be a very, very good Chris Richards level center back for the rest of his career? We're not going to bring him in for one of the last two camps and at least give him a look. No, we don't want to even do that off the bench. No. All right. Well, this is where I disagree with Poch. I think Noah Kai Banks should be here. And frankly, I think he should be here over Miles Robinson. Pete, with all the injuries, when do they start building chemistry, especially the back line? Well, yes, it's an issue, but you can't control injuries, right? Injuries happen. What you can control is when guys are healthy, you bring them in to help develop chemistry. It's important going into a World Cup. We have minimal preparation time left. We've got minimal time with the national team. And on top of it all, one of the hallmarks of Poch's teams is that they haven't looked very cohesive. So the one thing we should be working on is cohesion. And how do you build cohesion? Time, training camps together, games together against good opposition. And I'm going to talk more about this when we get to the midfield. But for right now, the big miss here is Noah Banks. And the one who shouldn't be here, Miles Robinson. That's just the truth. Our center back pool is not good enough to ignore a Bundesliga starter, regardless of how old he is. And whatever we have to say about his inexperience or him not playing well against RB Leipzig is true. It is also mitigated by the fact that when you look at the pool of center backs that we have available, every single one of them, minus Chris Richards, has issues. A couple of people talking about Leonard Maloney. Maloney is now playing center back in the Bundesliga. Could we perhaps have brought him in? Yes. Why not? He's playing center back. Is he great on the ball? No. No, he's not. Is he playing center back in the Bundesliga? I wouldn't have hated to see him brought in either, but he doesn't play in MLS, so it's much harder to get into the national team if you don't. You have to be playing at a really high level to get in. And two, we have a better center back, frankly, and his name is Noah Kai Banks, who really should be there. All right, so that is the center backs. Let's dive into the midfield now. And for everyone who laughed when I said Sean Sawatsky would be here, it is true. We have Tanner Tessman, Sean Sawatsky, Aidan Morris, Sebastian Berhalter, Tyler Adams, and Christian Roldan. Now, these are the midfielders that would play in a double pivot. If we play a 4-2-3-1, then Gio Reyna is included in this group as well, right? So Tanner Tessman obviously should be here. Tyler Adams obviously should be here. The big misses from this group are Weston McKennie and Johnny Cardoso. And maybe you could argue Yunus Musa, right? And we'll talk about that too. I'm not a fan of Yunus Musa, but we have to address the hypocrisy about the standards that we hold our guys in Europe to compared to the standards that we hold our guys in MLS to. Because it gets put all over Twitter when a player playing at a high level makes a mistake, but Tim Ream makes a mistake in the MLS playoffs and nobody even talks about it. That's one example of the hypocrisy. Okay. And let's continue. Christian Roldan should not be here. All right. Alexi Lalas today. In fact, let me pull up this tweet because I want to address this. It is a classic example of the hypocrisy and the nonsense that still, to this very day, comes out of MLS. Well, I don't want to say MLS, but US soccer pundits. All right, I'm going to try to make this a little bigger for you because I quote tweeted Alexi on this, and I think it's important to address. Dum, bum, ba-dum, bum, bum. Okay. Where is it? Yes. So, Alexi Lala started with this thing, Gio Reyna. Can you guys see this? Should I make it bigger? Let me make it a little bigger here. Gio Reyna, what USMNT, I think he meant to add player, in history has been given more chances, opportunity, and grace. That's the special privilege and faith often afforded to undeniable but unrealized young talent. Hope he takes full advantage of it, but Matt Turner must be shaking his head. Okay? This is his takes. Basically saying that Gio Reyna has been given too much grace. Now, Straight Red Card responded with, I don't want to bash anyone, but Christian Roldan has more caps and ultimately done far less than Giovanni Reyna. I would argue that Gio has taken advantage of most of his chances with the USMNT, which is why he's given chances, opportunities, and grace. Okay? Now, Alexi quote tweeted Straight Red by saying, no, and this is where I took issue with Alexi. I'd argue Roldan has done more, in parentheses, with less, and maintained a consistent high level for club and country. First of all, Roldan doesn't play for a club. He plays for a franchise. There are no clubs in MLS. And as far as country, he has 41 caps and has one decent to good game. Okay? One decent to good game. All without any hint of problems off the field and only glowing reports of his positive impact with the group. If at any point he faltered, he would have been gone forever. Bro has been doing nothing but faltering since he started his U.S. men's national team career, right? Been doing nothing but faltering. And then 41 caps later, he has one decent game in a friendly against Australia, and all of a sudden, he's projected to be this incredible player because these MLS shills cannot get enough of doing, sucking off you know who, right? This is the guy who calls all the games on Fox. And so a lot of you guys know that this is, Alexi being Alexi. A lot of casuals don't know that, though. They're like, oh, he's the pundit. He must know what he's talking about. And we are manufacturing consent for shitty culture. So, of course, I had to talk about what is actually true because Alexi tries to create a narrative and completely ignores facts. Gio Reyna has 13 goal contributions for the U.S., 5 of which were in Nations League finals. Roldan has one decent performance in 42 caps. You can argue Gio shouldn't be here based on club form, and you certainly can. But suggesting that Roldan has somehow outperformed him for the U.S. is hilarious. And that is 100% true. A lot of people will bag on Gio, even though Gio Reyna has not been with the national team since Nations League, right? He's been ignored, and you can argue rightfully so. But all of a sudden, we're acting like he's been given so many opportunities, right? He actually has not. In fact, generally, when he has played for the U.S., he's looked pretty good. Okay. Now, we're talking about Gio Reyna's inclusion in this camp because he's basically here because of the injuries to some key players, and he has to take advantage of it. And if he doesn't take advantage of it, he probably won't go to that World Cup. So it's sort of last chance saloon for Gio Reyna. But pretending that Roldan has somehow been more effective for the national team because your brain is too addled to remember beyond one game against Australia, which, by the way, he was also responsible for the goal that we conceded, is a completely twisted version of the truth, and nobody does that better. Nobody does that better than our lovely, godforsaken USMNT media in this country. A bunch of MLS shills who will say anything for a paycheck. All right, but let's get back to the roster as we continue. So Roldan is there. You know who else is there who shouldn't be there? Sebastian Berhalter. Sean Zawadzki, are you out of your mind? Why is Weston McKennie not there? Well, he said he wanted him to get to know Spalletti. This is nonsense, okay? And I'm going to tell you why. Spalletti already started him in the first game, number one. Number two, you have Spalletti. He went to Juve and said, I want his contract renewed. So he's already won over Spalletti. Furthermore, what is Wes going to be doing in getting to know Spalletti? He's going to be training with the B team. You know why? Because most of that A team is on international duty. So he's there with the B team, training, having spaghetti with Spalletti, as though that is more important than the very major issue of our guys have not played enough together because of injuries, because of Pochettino's completely absurd roster selections, because of people like Pulisic, calling out of the Gold Cup, et cetera, et cetera. This team lacks chemistry and cohesions, and with only 2 camps left before the World Cup, the priority cannot be go have an espresso with Spalletti instead of come and play for your country, because that should be the priority. So I don't know why we are not calling in Weston McKennie. I honestly do not know. And Poch says, we know what he can offer. It's not about what he can offer. It's about what this team can look like with all of our best players playing well together against good tests like Paraguay and Uruguay. That's what this is about. It's not about seeing who offers what. It's about having a team, a good team, your best players playing together against a good opponent so we can develop all the things that Pochettino says he wants. I want them to fight, all of these things that he talks about, brotherhood and cohesion and everybody together working for the crest. Pochettino himself was the one who said, I want us to treat every game like a World Cup final, even a friendly, like in Argentina. But then from his own mindset, it's more important to go have a fucking pizza slice with Spalletti. I'm sorry. Are you out of your mind? I don't agree with this. I don't agree with this at all. Okay? And let's talk about Johnny. Johnny should be here too. Well, Pete, he's injured. He's not injured. He's not injured. He's actually fully fit and ready to come back. It's Atletico Madrid. You don't just come back from injury and then all of a sudden start. That's not how it works. He's been on the bench for the last 2 games. He's going to be on the bench again this weekend. Maybe he'll even get some minutes this weekend. We haven't had a chance to see Johnny because of all these injuries. So now, in the last opportunity we have to bring him, no, we'd rather see Sean fucking Zawadzki instead, who everybody already knows is not good enough to play at a World Cup. It doesn't make any sense. All right? Aiden Morris can be here. Roldan, Zawadzki, Berhalter out. None of them World Cup level players, right? And because, and by the way, let's talk about Yunus Musa. I am no fan of Yunus Musa. His development has stalled. Frankly, he's in the same zone as Giovanni Reyna, except the one difference is that Giovanni Reyna has actually really played well for his country, and Musa has not. But Yunus Musa is not playing well for Atalanta or Milan. Really hasn't. Do we think that Christian Roldan or Sean Zawadzki or Sebastian Berhalter would get minutes at either of those clubs? No, of course they wouldn't. So if Yunus Musa was playing in MLS, he'd be a DP. He'd probably be in team of the season because he's Yunus Musa. And I'm not a Yunus Musa fan. But again, the hypocrisy of he shouldn't be here because he's not playing at Atalanta. Yeah, well, these guys aren't playing at Atalanta. If that's our new metric for who should be involved, make it make sense. And look, I'm not going to die on the Musa Hill. I'm just pointing it out as massive hypocrisy, okay? Because that's exactly what it is. So these are the midfielders that we have. Now let's go to the attacking midfielders / tucked in wingers. You have Brendan Aronson, Gio Reyna, and Diego Luna. Gio Reyna's back. I've addressed it. This is last chance saloon for Gio Reyna. And for anyone who says he shouldn't be here, I'd say based on his club form, I probably agree with you. He got injured again for Gladbach. Since then, he's been getting 10, 12 minutes off the bench. Cardoso is not injured anymore, guys. He's not injured anymore. He came back from injury 2 weeks ago. Okay? So Gio Reyna, Pochettino also said, well, he's not really here so much to play. So expect Gio Reyna to not get minutes. He's here for us to get to know him in the same way that he wants Roldan to get to know Spalletti. I don't know what Pochettino's thing is, where he wants everyone to sit around a campfire and get to know each other and not play football, but make it make sense. Look, it's on Gio Reyna because he might say that now, but if Gio Reyna comes into camp and is balling out in training every day and working hard and doing the things that Pochettino wants, maybe he won't start, but maybe he'll get minutes off the bench. And that, frankly, is up to Giovanni Reyna. So we'll see what he does. But it's on him. This is his last chance to be like, no, Poch, I deserve a spot on that 2026 roster. Let's see if he takes it. Right? Let's see if he takes it. Vini kind of out. Let me ask you a question, Vini kind of out. You're saying we still trying to make Reyna a thing 6 years later. Considering all the injuries, because Zembeas is injured, Weah is injured, Pulisic is injured, Tillman is injured. So all 4 of them are either injured or literally just coming back from injury this week. So considering those injuries, do you think it is worth bringing Gio Reyna along for one last chance? And if not, answer me this. Who would you bring instead of Gio Reyna? Put it in the chat. I want to know. I'm curious. Because if you think there's somebody better than Gio Reyna, and maybe you'll say Brian Gutierrez deserved his chance. To be honest, I think both Owen Wolff and Brian Gutierrez probably deserve a look more than Diego Luna, who gets endless looks for this team because of one broken nose and a decent showing in Gold Cup that actually he did not look good against Mexico, Switzerland, or Turkey, and hasn't looked good in the subsequent friendlies. So the question has to be begged, as much as we all love Diego Luna and his sort of, street ball style and his sort of, love for the country and everything. And those are all good things. I don't even necessarily hate that he's on this roster, but it seems to me like Diego Luna is just kind of a lock no matter how he plays, but we're not going to give Brian Gutierrez. And by the way, both Brian Gutierrez and Owen Wolf both had better seasons this year in MLS than Diego Luna did. So look, you could maybe make the argument Gio shouldn't be here, Brian Gutierrez should, or Owen Wolf should. I would argue you could bring one of those two and also bring Gio Reyna, right? But tell me honestly who you want to bring, because that's part of the problem is so many guys are injured and we don't have that much quality and depth. You know what I mean? So tell me. I still haven't seen it, Vinny. Put in the chat who you want to bring instead of him. Somebody asking about Brandon Vasquez. Brandon Vasquez, real quick before we go on to the strikers, had one good season in Cincinnati 2 years ago, and everybody demanded he be on the national team. They demanded it. He needs to be there. He scores goals, they said. In the same way that fucking Duncan McGuire scores goals, or the same way that Jesus Ferreira scores goals in MLS. And then we said it wouldn't translate to the national team, and it did not. And he wasn't even good in MLS after that. And then he went to Mexico and flopped for Monterrey, and then came back to Austin, and frankly didn't do that well in Austin before his injury, and then he tore his ACL. But he is the classic example. We did the same thing with Patrick Aguimang, of finding the latest sort of hot streak guy in MLS, whether it's Aguimang or Brian White, and being like, ooh, they're the new guy. He does things with his body. This is not a strip club. It's a national team. We don't care what he does with his body. Okay? Aguimang's at Derby now, and he has one goal in 700 minutes in the championship. Cade Cowell's another example. Everybody said he was good. He's not good. He wasn't good. Tack and I said this, and people got mad at us. Oh, what are you saying? He scored in the youth team. So he was a very big athletic player with no technical ability, and he went to Liga MX, not a top 5 league, not a top 7-8 league in Europe. He went to Liga MX and is a permanent bench player there for Chivas Guadalajara. I think he has 1 goal contribution all season. Anyways, going to get off the soapbox now. Gio Reyna's here. Will he play? I don't know. But frankly, it's on Gio now. He needs to ball out in training if he wants a chance to play. All right. Forwards, spot on. Fullerman, Balogun, Ricardo, Pepe, Haji Wright. These are the 3 that should go to the World Cup. Sargent and Aguimang miss out. Both Pepe and Balogun in good form for clubs, right? Pepe's finally back from his injury, got 2 goals off the bench, 1 in the Champions League and 1 in the league itself. Hopefully he starts this weekend. Fingers crossed. I think he deserves to start. Balogun is finding, hot form. 3 goals in the last 4 games. And Haji Wright, obviously, fresh off that brace against Australia. So he's probably our 3rd striker. Sargent, no matter what you're doing for club, and he hasn't scored since the last camp, although he did get 2 assists in his last 2 games, hasn't been doing it for the national team. And Patrick Aguimang, thank God he's not here, because I think Aguimang in the championship is getting found out. What we said in the Gold Cup over and over and over again, this guy is not USMNT quality. He's not even, frankly, championship quality. But Pete, he got 3 assists. One of those assists, he was falling over and the ball bounced off of him. Another one of those assists was literally a header in midfield down to a guy, and the guy ran the entire length of the field and scored himself. So this guy, and he only has 1 goal, okay? And he's played 700 minutes. This is the championship, keep in mind. He's not even outperforming other guys in the championship that should be that 3rd place, whether it's Haji or Sargent, right? He's barely outperforming Charlie Kelman, who also has 1 goal. So should we bring in Charlie Kelman, or do you want to watch Bambi flounder like a wet fish on dry land? I don't know why I'm getting so upset. He's not here. But, my point is Aguimang being found out. So 3 good strikers. This is good to see. I'd say Balogun starts 1 game. Maybe you give Pepe another game, or maybe you start Balogun in both and you bring Pepe off the bench. Whatever Poch wants to do with these 2 is fine. They're both in good form. They both offer different things. For me, Balogun is clearly still the starter. He offers things that Pepe does not. Pepe may or may not be a better poacher than Balogun, but in terms of his hold-up play, his combination play, and his 1v1 ability, Balogun is the superior player. All right, guys, Derek invited me. Perfect. Tell them this. Okay, we're going to end our stream here. Tell Derek I'm going to head over there. I can't stay for too long, but I'll stay for a while. So I'm going to end this stream, guys. Hit the like button before you leave. And if you want to check out the Patreon, it's in the description below. And we're going to head over to Straight Red Card together. And we're going to hang out with them because they're also talking about this roster. And it's always fun to hang with those guys. So let's all head over there. Thanks for watching, guys. And I'll see you over there.